Welcome to another convo with the columns. She is your host.
I like for you to be the host on this.
So today we thought that we would discuss the topic of self-defeating behavior. So if you were to try to communicate to somebody what a self-defeating behavior is, how would you describe that?
I would say behaviors that we participate in when we're afraid, that rob us of authentic engagement with other people.
You sound like a professional.
I'm not a professional. Maybe previously a professional at playing the self-defeating games.
Practice. Just know what it cost us.
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
so today's conversation is if you Google this, which you can, you will see these pop up as 7 self-defeating behaviors.
I think Dr. Phil actually made them pretty, maybe I wouldn't say popular, but I feel like that's where we learned them from was Dr. Phil. He maybe garnered more awareness for the public.
Sure. So the idea of today's conversation would be to go through all 7 of these, describe what they are and the way that it can evolve or play out, pun intended, because they are called games for a reason.
Mhm. Yes.
Um, and so really it would just be a back and forth conversation of what we, at least what I have experienced, is that we can be guilty of playing any or all 7 of them,
Mhm.
but we probably have a propensity to be more drawn to some specific ones.
Yeah.
But to your point, anytime that we're letting fear control what we think about ourselves and or the other person,
Or the situation. Mhm.
then if our thoughts control our emotions and our emotions control our actions, this is the tangible evidence of behaviors that are being partnered with
Mhm.
outside of our authentic.
Yes.
Do you have more to add?
I do, but I don't think right now is the time. I just had a lot of thoughts but I'm gonna stick them in my pocket until we discuss a little bit further, or or I'll get us rabbit hole in.
So here's what we'll just take these one at a time. And the way that I know I communicate them, but we have a tendency to share them, is there is no particular order that any of these 7 exist. They're not ranked. One's not worse than the other. They're all self-defeating and they're labeled that as such because they're going to cost you something.
Right, it's something you're doing that's, again, just getting in the way of you being your true authentic self and, yeah, being fully known and
Well,
seen and
sure. I think another way I have heard it phrased is you would play these in lieu of believing that you're a powerful person. And so some of the language that we use sometimes would also be synonymous as, all right, we're playing power and control games instead of choosing to just be a powerful person. But a powerful person isn't trying to manipulate situations.
no, I think that would have to define what is a powerful person, and for me, a powerful person that operates out of love and compassion and my true authentic self, and the opposite of what these are, acting out of fear.
Yeah, I even think that a powerful person, aside from having a measure of confidence or conviction within yourself, would believe the best in another person.
Yes. Yes. And I think even if yeah, I think even being a powerful person to me is even if the other person it's playing one of these games, power and control games, you recognize that they're just afraid.
Yeah.
So you can stay in a place of, again, of love and compassion for that person, knowing that they're just afraid.
So, yeah, we'll lead off with that. So, one of them is hide behind judgments. But I think before we dive off into each one of these, one of the things that I love to communicate when I'm sharing this is that there's actually going to be 3 ways that these get played. So, we're going to play these internally with ourselves. We don't just engage these externally in a one-on-one relationship. So, the value of learning these is really starting with how are you cheating yourself? Again, for me, it's because it's labeled self-defeating. What is it costing you to engage in these behaviors yourself? So you're gonna play these games internally. You will play these games externally, but then as I share frequently, human behavior is pretty consistent. So what we're prone to do anything of, we have a tendency to do most everything of. Therefore, how this plays out in the natural is also how this plays out in the vertical. So if we're prone to play it internally, then we definitely will play it with God or how you view higher powers. So as we dialogue each of these bullet points, keep in mind there would be at any given time 3 versions of this particular game that could be entertained. So,
So,
hiding
hiding
behind
behind
judgment.
judgment.
Yes.
Let's talk about that one.
All right. I think hiding behind judgments is just, it's pretty much what you say. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Is like you are judging either a person or a situation or an outcome before, instead of staying in a place of curiosity around it. Instead of having questions and, yeah, just being curious, like, oh, where did that come from? Then immediately you go to judging the person across from you or the situation, or yeah, to me, that's what that looks like.
Yeah, I think what I find fascinating is that when we're helping people,
Mhm.
most of the time people won't identify hiding behind judgments as a predominant game that they engage.
However,
However, it's
it's
the
the reason.
reason that I like to set up the conversation going, you're going to play these internally
Yeah.
because it always starts with ourselves.
Mhm.
You will also play them externally and vertically.
Mhm.
But what we know to be true is
Is
that hiding behind judgments is often the number one self defeating behavior of humanity because
because
it is the lie that you're
you're believing
believing about yourself
That's so true. Yeah.
that
that
is
is
then
then
affecting
affecting
how
how
you're
you're
showing
showing
up
up
in
in
your
your
Mhm.
circumstances.
circumstances.
Yeah, yeah, that is really true.
And
And
so,
so,
what,
Judging yourself or, yeah,
however it's
yeah,
being
yep.
processed, but it
but it
is
is
still
still
a
a
judgment
judgment
because
because
we
we
have
have
limited
limited
information
Mhm.
and
and
you're
you're
seeing it
seeing it
only
only
through
through
the
the
lens of
lens of
your
your
experience,
experience,
which
which
isn't
isn't
invalid,
invalid,
Right.
but
but
it
it
definitely
definitely
doesn't,
doesn't,
to
to
your
your
point,
point,
create
create
curiosity at
curiosity at
times
times
when
when
fear
fear
ends
ends
up
up
being
being
the
the
motivator
motivator
rather
rather
than
than
love.
love.
Mhm.
And so if
So if
fear is
fear is
being your
being your
motivator,
motivator,
then
then
what
what
you're
you're
telling
telling
yourself
yourself
about
about
you
you
and
and
or the
or the
person in
person in
front of
front of
you
you
Or your higher power.
or
Yeah.
or
God
God
is
is a
what we
what we
call
call.
limiting belief.
Yep.
So
So
hiding
hiding
behind
behind
judgments is
typically
typically as
as
much of
much
a
of a
psychological
psychological
battle
battle
as it
as it
is a
is a
relational
relational,
battle,
Mhm.
I
I
would
would
say.
say.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think, yes, all of these too. I like how you're breaking it down, which again, this is kind of a boundaries conversation too, but every external boundary cross began with an internal boundary crossed.
For sure.
And so it's kind of the same. Like if you're going to believe that internally, it's going to affect how you show up externally.
Any
Any
others you
others
want to
you
elaborate on around that? Hiding behind judgments?
No, I love how you even said it's kind of the grandfather, so to speak, of all other self-defeating behaviors, because if you're hiding behind a judgment that you're even making about yourself, it's gonna affect all the way that you show up, which a lot of them are more, um, yeah, external actions, maybe. I will say this too, if hiding behind judgments is one of the primary, well, we all hide behind judgments, but one way that I feel like someone that really participates in hiding behind judgments will show up is they will judge other people really quickly. And so because it's we know this to be true, if you judge other people harshly, it's just highlighting how harshly you're judging yourself. And so I think too that helps me stay in compassion whenever I'm engaging someone that is really hard on other people. It's just highlighting, oh, they really don't see themselves valuable. They're judging themselves really harshly.
For sure. Y yeah, this is where it could go in a lot of different directions, but I know for me, if I find myself with a perspective of pessimism, then I am typically either in a really critical atmosphere or mindset, and so, because that was again, family of origin stories are relevant because if we don't know what we don't know, then it's hard to give ourselves grace and compassion. To your
Mhm.
point, like when you're hearing somebody that seems very judgmental, because we've created the awareness that that external judgment is a product of internal judgment,
Sure. Yep.
then it's much easier to want to have empathy and compassion towards that person in that moment because you understand the origination of that dynamic.
Yep.
So for me, if I were to say, yeah, probably would have been able to say, had a critical parent. If I don't find myself thinking optimistic or speaking optimistic at times, then I have to be very cautious about what I say because most of the time it will sound critical to somebody.
So do you feel like you're hiding behind judgments then?
I think in some capacity, sure, which often is just really a product of fear,
Yeah.
not knowing how you're going to be treated, not really feeling
Mhm.
confident in yourself. So all these dynamics can kind of play out in a variety of levels. But when I learned these, like I said, I can look at my atmosphere and upbringing going, well, it makes sense why I felt like I had a critical parent.
Sure.
Not even being judgmental towards that situation. It's just, oh, I can see where these were contributing factors. And when there is a lot of stress and when there is a lot of overwhelmment, then the first thing that we have a tendency to do in human nature, I believe, is to want to begin to try to mitigate problem. So if we can somehow figure out how to say, "We'll do this so that maybe I can get a different result."
Which looks different for every person.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I said, we can get really nuanced in this. So because I think that's like, we can take this into a whole 'nother level of saying, "Okay, well, what does this behavior look like passively versus aggressively?"
Yeah, because the first thing that comes to mind is like you, because I know your personality, yours would be like take action, take charge, do things. And because of the way I was raised, my go to before I did a lot of work was do not participate. And so that is the way I would try to control the situation was to take a very passive approach and avoid, really. It's avoid conflict, avoid engagement when things are scary. Just find a way to get out of it as fast as you can. And so I think that's where it looks different for every person.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so still out of a way, still have a need and a desire to control it, but instead of it being or appearing like a real aggressive take charge kind of person, I was trying to control it passively by just avoiding it, which is do not participate.
I don't wanna get lost in my thoughts, so I have these written down. but that's not in order.
I just when you said try to control it, that was definitely a way that I would try to control, yeah, my
For sure.
that would be the way I would try to navigate even criticism or if judgments were coming towards me, I would just try to avoid either that person or that situation or, yeah.
So I'll move up the bullet points. Next one listed, again, no particular order, spread lies and gossip.
Mm,
Now, again, the reason that I get really adamant to want to articulate that we play these internally,
mhm,
typically before we ever play them in externally, is on account of this same narrative. What we believe about ourselves is the game spreading lies and gossip,
mhm.
if it is not the truth.
That's good, good point. And what we believe about other people, the s the stories we make up in our head.
But I think just maybe to bookend or move out of hiding behind judgments, I think relationally, especially the more equity that you have in a relationship, it's easy to get presumptive, which is a lot of hiding behind judgment.
Mhm,
Hey, if this feels this certain way, then I'm anticipating that what the result is going to be is according to what I've only experienced from you ever before,
mhm.
which is a lot of hiding behind. Although there may be merit to experiencing somebody similar, if we only believe that that's ever going to be the same outcome from that person, then we don't ever get to experience that person any other way.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, it doesn't even have to be behaviors from that person, like, we pick up judgments so fast on people and if it even smells like, looks like, even resembles a previous experience that maybe wasn't we didn't, um yeah, that we experienced hurt in, then we can oftentimes judge people super fast, just because of our worldview, our past experiences, and it doesn't even have to be that that particular person has done anything wrong if it just somehow resembles in any way, even looks or sounds or whatever. We can pick up judgments so fast. Yeah.
This is, yes, I'm going to be careful that I don't get on a soapbox, specifically even around this one, because given that we are in the Midwest, considered the Bible Belt, I find how prevalent this particular one ends up being because the common conversation here will be, "Hey, where do you go to church?"
Mhm.
As soon as you communicate where you might go to church, there becomes a judgment, truth be told, most of the time, around how you begin to perceive that person based on what denomination, affiliation, location they relate to. The danger in that is that we don't look higher than a theology and say, "Well, who is the person?"
Mm.
I I think it's even, I have experienced this enough to say this. I'm not trying to make a point about me, but most people are not gonna walk up and expect emotional intelligence conversation from a hat.
Or your choice of music.
I like a beat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it can be low stakes and very insignificant, but
Mhm.
I find it, the human condition has a lot of propensity to create quick judgments on affiliation.
For sure.
But that also segues into spreading lies and gossip, even on the topic of religion. As soon as somebody identifies a certain way with a particular denomination, we may immediately create a perspective towards that person that
Mhm.
you might never experience, because if you don't ask them enough questions to understand how they landed where they are,
Mhm.
then you just begin to adopt assumptions around maybe this predominant theological narrative associated to that denomination. And
Mhm.
so I think that's where spreading lies and gossip looks a lot of different ways, but sometimes those can be overlapped in a judgment as much as it is the verbal communication of, because I think when I hear that term spreading lies and gossips, my original mind goes to what's what you're saying.
Which is true. I mean, that's part of it too. Like, I mean, that is part of it. I think that's obvious.
Right. But I think I nuance that a little bit just because the not so obvious is just as much, well, I can carry an assumption
Mm.
into an interaction with a person
Yeah.
that may not be fair at all. And yes, it could be a judgment, but I think it parallels this a lie or a gossip kind of
Mhm.
narrative.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that one?
No, I think, yeah, there's definitely layers to it, um, for sure. I think another more obvious, I think, way lies and gossip get spread when you bring up religion. I think about prayer circles that I've even been involved in,
For sure.
and people sharing other people's stories under the, "Oh, we need to pray for this person," but they're really oversharing,
Mhm.
spreading lies and gossip instead of out of sincere concern.
For sure.
And so there's lots of pretty ways that we can spread lies and gossip that maybe wouldn't be as blatant. Um, but and I think, um, yeah, I just being really careful about what you share with other people about other people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Again, I wanted to say I wanted to be careful because I get really passionate on all these as it relates to religion, because I see where, to your point, all of these have been justified,
Yes.
but they're still really perverted.
Yeah.
They're extremely manipulative,
Mhm.
and it's all attached to God or the name of Jesus to justify how they're still permitted and or embraced.
And I mean, I think even outside of religion, like, it can happen in families and in friend groups whenever you begin to, which I begin to share, like, "Hey, this happened with," or "How do you feel like she's doing?" or "How do you feel like she's doing?" But yet you're never having conversations with the person that you're talking about, which can be sincerely, like, out of concern for somebody, but if you're never addressing the person that you're talking about, you're actually participating in the lies and gossip.
Yeah.
And so I know you and I are really passionate about, we're not gonna communicate outside of, if we don't have the courage to go talk to that person about whatever we're processing, then we don't need to be having that conversation with anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, and to even keep it more real because we are blended families, I mean, there's just dynamics that we don't wanna put our kids in the middle of going, "What is that?"
Yeah.
It's not fair to them.
No.
And so that's one that we haven't perfected it at all, but it's definitely one that, yeah, the value of wanting to understand these tools is to preserve connection
Mhm.
with the closest relationships.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, yeah, as much as a parent, you always want to be aware of how your kid's doing. There's certain boundaries that you have to enact when you're a blended family that says, "Hey, if they share that with me, then I wanna hold space for that to work, but we
Mhm.
wanna honor always."
Yeah.
And so, even if it's a big family, my mom came from one of 9. So, what does it look like to have honest conversation, but still address the person that you have a problem with?
Yeah.
which again, back to boundaries. There's a lot of nuance in this to where you're not just trying to honor the person related to the story, but as we oftentimes communicate, you're not trying to communicate information or talk about the story. That's not the point. You're trying to talk about what's going on inside of you.
I feel like you and I have shared it this way with our kids, like, you have full permission to be honest about what you're experiencing, but we will stay in a place of honor if it is if another person is involved. We'll stay in a place of honor, especially when it comes to their other parent. I have not been perfect in that, I know, but definitely, that is our heart, is to stay honoring with no matter who they're talking about, but you have full permission to be as honest with what is you are experiencing, what's going on inside of you.
Yeah. How does this affect you?
Yep.
Right.
How can we support you? How can we get you back to believing the truth about who you are and give you the tools to navigate what you're experiencing?
Right. Because the self-defeating behavior of spreading lies and gossip is talking about other people rather than yourself.
Yeah.
That's just the point.
Yep.
I don't know why that got well, I do know why, because it's hard.
Yes.
It's hard.
Yeah. I would even say, like, you can see this happen. I don't know about men, but I have seen it happen with even women talking about their spouses, like not having the courage to have the honest conversation with their spouses. And so they show up and maybe are even spreading lies and gossip about the person that they're married to instead of having the courageous conversations with their spouse.
Yeah, but I because this is some of the space that we reside in, what I want to clarify is that we're not saying that you don't need a safe place to share.
No, not at all.
But again, when you have close friends, if they haven't learned what accountability looks like, then they may tolerate you talking about somebody else rather than yourself,
Yes.
including your spouse,
Yeah.
kids, siblings, whatever the circumstance is. And so I think that's the point to highlight is what does it look like to get healthy people around you so that you can have a safe place to process, but you're doing that with accountability
Mhm.
so that you don't move into just talking about the circumstance. And again, what we hear a lot of times from people is that they end up wanting to tell the story. And the story then is validating their behaviors, which oftentimes are self-defeating. Again, we don't wanna be absolute, but
Well, I will say it for me most always. If I'm talking about a circumstance instead of what I'm experiencing, I'm being a victim in it. I'm operating out of fear.
a third behavior is called change the game.
Mhm.
How would you describe that?
Yeah, I think in conversations, which I feel like this word gets way overused, but gaslighting would be a conversation like if it was to happen externally where I would come or if s- yeah, I would come to or someone came to me with a problem, something that they had a experience that I had done and I turn it back on them. Um,
Another one just came to mind to me. Internally, spiritual bypassing would be change the game internally. So, shameless plug, if you wanna know what spiritual bypassing is, go to the previous episode.
yes. Yeah, it's a really pretty way to change the game for sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
when I learned these, obviously, it has the tendency to be very convicting.
Mm.
Honestly, for me, I wanna throw up, but change the game was very much a really high one on my list as a go-to.
So how would you say that played out for you?
Do you like hunting?
Hunting? Do I like hunting? Not necessarily. I don't know if I've ever been hunting.
How about sports? Do you like sports?
I do like sports.
I just changed the game. And so for whatever reason, because I have had a tendency in conversations.
I feel like I just got baited too. That was just saying, "I trusted you."
Do no harm, right? It was a practical example. Low stakes, but, like, changing the game, to your point, is really wanting to shift the dynamic immediately and somehow be in charge of where something's going. And so it can happen whether it's aggressive or passive, right? Let's say somebody who is super apt to serve and might be a more passive personality. Something gets really volatile, the first thing that they'll wanna do is try to people please.
Mhm. Yep.
I mean, that is a change the game.
Mhm.
It's a combination of another one we'll get to, but, like, usually that's one, anytime that I've gone through and tried to communicate these with people, this is one that's like, "Help me understand what that one is."
Yeah.
And so I just communicated it that way for the sake of that's how quick, you know, we know it in power and control games, like word salad could be another way that that gets you'll be sitting there listening to somebody and in the way that you may have approached them with a problem. By the time you get
Mhm.
done, you're like, "Number 1, we're not even in the same zip code, but what are we even talking about now? And I feel like it's about me rather than about you." That would be examples when somebody's a really good orator. Usually, you'll see them play change the game by leading the conversation. I know that because that's very much what I did.
Yes. I'm processing how I can still play that game, and I would not until this conversation have labeled it as change the game, but for sure, whenever I get frustrated and I'm not understanding where someone else is coming from, then I will oftentimes own more than my side of the street
Mm,
to try to go back just to take control. Like, okay, if what do you need? What do you, how can I show up for you? Because right now I'm not feeling shown up for, but if I can continue to show up for you, then I can at least feel a little more in control.
right. Yeah, and I think it for whatever reason, I would say it was a prompting of God when I began to communicate these as we share in some of our courses. I always felt like bringing awareness of the passive personality and the
Mhm.
aggressive personality because by and large, most every person can acknowledge aggressive behavior.
Mhm.
It's easy to identify. It's commonplace to say, "Oh, that person is being boundaryless."
Yeah.
The reason that I like to bring it up and hold those 2 present while processing these conversations is because I think organizationally, and I would even go as far as to say religion is passive. A lot of times you won't see the red flags in a change the game in religion. Somebody goes in, they're trying to communicate some problems in the church, and the first thing that somebody might wanna do in this dynamic would be, "Well, have you prayed about that?" And I'm not saying that wouldn't be a fair question.
Mhm.
Instead of maybe holding space for the person, let's say it's not a routine interaction. Let's say that I come to you the first time and I'm trying to communicate something, and you're a leader in the church, whatever. That would be a fair question to me. "Hey, how do you feel like the Lord has have you had a conversation? Where do you feel like that prompting is?" But let's say that I come to you all the time and that ends up being your first go-to. Well, what I would say is that that's that person's defense mechanism because they don't know how to handle a really overwhelming person. So they're wanting to offload this on God, which has changed the game. Well, have you talked to God about it versus putting up a boundary and or a better conversation with maybe an unhealthy person that keeps wanting to come and vent?
Uh, gotcha. Okay.
Like,
Yes. Instead of just addressing it
right,
head on. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I will say though, and I'm looking through the lens that was modeled to me, that passive approach, especially in women, was celebrated.
For sure.
But it does manipulation really begins to the less powerful a person feels, usually the more they're gonna partner with manipulation. And so I think oftentimes women get, um well, it was told to me growing up that women are manipulative. And now I recognize, yeah, maybe, I don't think any more so than men, but the more you oppress women, the more passively they are gonna try to gain control through manipulation. So I feel like yeah, but oftentimes the more women are oppressed, the more they go to that passiveness, which is shows out even still manipulative and just out of a necessity to still have some sort of control.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Again, I have had a tendency, for whatever reason, to consider these games through religion.
yeah,
But to me, one of the big characters biblically for Change the Game is Jezebel.
help me understand.
She was interested in the control, the power herself. And
And
it
it
was
was
always
always
an
an
instance
instance of
of how
how
do
do
I
I
articulate
articulate something
something to
to
try
try
to
to get
get a
a
position
position
of
of
perceived
perceived
power
power.
back.
Do you feel like Jezebel was passive? I never viewed the Jezebel spirit as
No, no,
passive.
no, I'm not saying she's passive. I'm
Okay.
saying, like, if I just think about Change the Game and then who's a biblical character that comes to mind
Yeah,
that really is a strong representation of that, that's the first one that comes to mind.
gotcha.
Not that that's the only one, it's just like, you know, if you sprinkle the Christianese on it and you hear people talk about the Jezebel spirit, well, power and control games are demonic. Self-defeating behaviors are partnering with lies. So,
Well, I think, I mean, the Bible says the spirit of or manipulation is the spirit of witchcraft. So I think power and control games all fall under manipulation,
yeah,
which therefore are all a spirit of witchcraft.
right. It's just deceit. Whether it's partial truth or absolute lies,
Yes.
anything that isn't in agreement to absolute truth. So,
So
yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's where,
where, like I
like I said,
said, I
I
wanna
want to
be
be
careful
careful
because
because
I
I
get
get passionate
passionate to
to
wanna
want to
call
call
religion for what it can be. The
the
Pharisees
Pharisees.
existed for us to have an understanding of how much you can take this too far,
Yeah,
under the name of trying to control people.
right. Which religion too, like I said, goes hand in hand with performance and which is not tied to your true authentic self. So, or if you're, yeah. Which you said something around truth, which brings me to the next self-defeating behavior is playing the nice guy.
You skipped one, though.
Well, I'm not going in order. I'm just going through in conversation what kind of brought me to the next self-defeating behavior, and which is Whi which is not playing the nice guy, I think ties a lot into or I feel like this is segueing into that one, I guess I should say, kind of back to that passive behavior, not telling the truth is really what it is, and playing the nice guy is you're gonna go along with it without whether you believe it or not, or whether I call it dishonest kindnesses, like lying. That was one of my go-tos, and I remember the first time someone told me and I considered honesty one of my core values, and when they said, "Millie, you are just lying all the time," and I was like, "I do not lie. I do not
Did
lie."
your finger come up?
Yeah, and they were like, "You lie all the time," and I was like, "I don't lie." They were like and they began to share, "How many times do you say yes when you really mean no?" And how many times do you agree with things that you don't are not in agreement with? And it was so convicting to me because I had always thought honesty was one of my core values. And for them to highlight, no, I was lying all the time by not being honest around how I felt, honest about my convictions, my beliefs, mostly honest about my emotions,
Right.
what I was feeling in the moment, which I think goes back
Honesty
to
is still a core value, by the way.
yes, it is. It's one of my still one of my and I am now com probably honest to a fault most of the time about how I feel, and yeah.
How would you say because for me, when I look at these, I am not saying that I have never participated in play the nice guy. What I will say is not at all my go-to,
I can honestly say I don't think I have ever witnessed you playing the nice guy.
but using the phrase dishonest kindness, I can relate to.
Hmm.
But how would you describe playing the nice guy maybe vertically? What would that look like?
Yes, I think if when we were talking about spiritual bypassing, I think this one relates probably more to the way I perceived it, where if I do all the right things, like I couldn't admit to God what was really going on inside of me. Like if I had doubt, don't dare admit that. Or if I was angry, for sure don't get angry with God. Don't let him know that you're angry with him. Right, out of that fear of punishment, and so there was a lot of dishonest kindnesses, not that he didn't already know, but
Sure.
it was I mean, that was the way I approached God, was I call it my tap dance, just constantly like, "Everything's great, I'm fine, I believe you, I trust you," and even though I maybe didn't in certain circumstances, I was not honest with God around what I was really feeling, and I think that's one reason I'm so passionate about God is so gracious and good, and he already knows anyway, and that was one reason I love David and just studying him is how honest he was with what he felt with God and how much God loved that, because again, it's in that vulnerability that creates intimacy. And so the vulnerable with what I'm feeling and honest with God, I'm not creating distance from him, I'm actually creating closeness. I'm coming to him in complete vulnerability, like, "This is what I'm feeling," and then that's when I feel him just swoop in and just really bring that comfort because he values honesty too. That's who he is, he can't be anything but honest.
Sure. Well, and to the point of all-knowing,
Yes. Yeah, it's not like I'm really hiding. You already know.
it's
Yeah.
kinda like in the garden originally when he asks, "Where are you?" It's not like he didn't know or he magically lost his first human.
Yeah.
So, I'll recount up into this point. We have communicated, hide behind judgments, spread lies or gossip, change the game, play the nice guy. You referenced do not participate. Would you like to talk
Yes.
about that one now?
Yeah, I think it's just avoiding hard conversations, avoiding conflict, avoiding anything difficult. I think big picture, just not even participating and taking risk in your own life. Not yeah, you just absolutely don't take risks, avoid conflict, avoid any chance of failure, just avoid. Avoid, avoid, avoid.
I think another synonymous term that comes to mind for me is playing small.
Yes.
Like if you identify that you're playing small in some aspect, you're very much engaging and do not participate.
Which I think all of these self-defeating behaviors keep us either playing small or or a false sense of safety. We think these are all keeping us safe, and they're not. Yeah.
That's fair. I'm mentally just processing if there's more to expound on. To me, do not participate is probably one of the most passive of the 7.
I was all the passive ones. Do not participate. Play the nice guy. Those are my top 2.
Is that Is that why they're listed in that order
Probably,
when you shared them?
probably. I
Because
can
I look
tell
at
you.
this and I'm like, "It's backwards for me."
Yes, shocking.
So, next one is be a problem. We
Yes.
haven't talked about that one yet. Okay. How have you experienced that one?
How have I experienced this? I think for me, it goes back to it's easier to spot maybe in other people, but I think about kids a lot, like, give them a chore to do, and they purposefully do a really crappy job just in hopes that they don't ever have to do it again or whatever.
I would even represent this as negative attention seeking.
So,
That would be the way that I would describe being a problem.
yes. And I would rather hide than get negative attention, but it just depends on who you are,
Sure.
right? Different personalities and what you feel like works for you, but yes, for sure. Um, how some would rather have negative attention than no attention at all. Um, yeah.
I also think, though, vertically, this one gets a bit more nuanced because when I have heard people in their conversations and we're going through these, this is probably one that gets put in a persecuting position where people will blame God as the problem. So there's a lot of wanting to offload the responsibility onto God on account of
Mhm.
blame shifting,
Mhm.
which we don't necessarily, it's when we're doing the self worth course,
Mm.
we articulate these in a little bit more nuance. So there's 14 of those games that are described there in the self
Yep.
worth course. But definitely that becomes one that I think of vertically outside of just absolute spite. Like if you just want to be rebellious, then you're being a problem with God,
Yeah.
which is still negative attention seeking.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But I think more times than not, the way that I see that partnered with is people putting that onto God as He is the reason. And it's a
Yeah.
big victim mentality,
Oh, yes.
wanting to bait God into a PBR triangle.
Yeah. I think, yeah, the more I'm sitting here processing, like I said, I like to, keep it like, own my own side of the street and all of it, but I think too, when I was learning tools and learning how to use my voice and not be so passive, I can still do this. If I feel like I'm really not being heard, I will definitely pendulum swing to be the problem, where it's almost a fit, like, flat out throwing a fit. I will be heard. Yes, everyone pray for Britain in those moments. Doesn't happen very often, but I can definitely see where I can pendulum swing to that with God, with the people across from me, whatever.
Yeah, and again, when you're thinking about negative attention seeking, like if we use that term synonymously with this particular bullet point, what we know to be true in all these is that you're not getting a need met that you don't believe will ever get met.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
sometimes when I think about be the problem, it may not be intuitive how you do that internally.
Mhm.
How does somebody be a problem to themselves?
Mhm.
Well, it would be easy to say, don't participate. But I think when you consciously choose a feel good payoff,
Mhm.
like you already know,
Well, I think you hear even addicts described like, um, self-sabotage would be, I think, be the problem within yourself. Like, like you said, you know what you're gonna do to ensure that.
yeah. I mean, I have an experience that I remember internally being the problem. Like I knew when I was very much in a ditch before I ever started figuring out how to get help. There was such a convoluted processing when you get that far removed from healthy identity, that even just what things that I entertained, the things that I would consider in my head,
Mm.
how to be ahead of somebody
Yeah.
just in and of itself, how much I was being a problem for me personally. Again, we know the Bible says, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. I don't know if we put a voice recording on Jesus's thoughts that we would ever hear some of what we entertain ourselves.
Mm.
Not that he didn't have questions, not that there weren't, but just being in enough awareness to have self control to say, this thought, if I let this keep playing out, for me, sometimes I have to make it so practical, like you said, like, how does this personally look for myself? The problem for me was what thoughts do I even allow to be entertained?
Yeah, I think yes, and I think even now I've learned if we know every emotion has an original thought, and so if I'm feeling something, tracing it back, like, okay, where did this emotion come from? Like, what were the thoughts where if I'm afraid or if I'm feeling insecure or whatever, what's the original thought attached to this? Because if I don't process that feeling, right, it's gonna become a mood. And then that mood unprocessed is gonna become an attitude. And so it's just yeah, I'm just working it backwards. I do that a lot. I work things backwards. Like, "Oh gosh, I've been in a funk for about an hour now. This is becoming a mood. What emotion have I not processed?" And then it goes back to the original thought. And then when I attach that original thought, then I can bring truth to that. Yeah.
Any other ones that come to mind around that before we get to our last one?
I don't think so.
So the last one is get them before they get you.
Yeah, I can think of a time that I was we had just started dating. We had only been dating a few months, maybe a couple months, and my life was still really messy, and I did not have a lot of tools, and I remember having a conversation like, "Hey, I don't think I'm your gal. You've done a lot of work. I haven't. You've got too little," just, like, wanting to just end the relationship so that I knowing that you were ahead of me in emotional awareness and tools and emotional health, and so just I can think of that, like, let's just end this now so I don't get hurt down the road.
Yeah, I almost process that for you as playing the nice guy as opposed to getting me before I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have endless stories for myself in the way that I processed getting other people before they got me.
Yeah, yeah, I think it could go back to that passive versus
Aggressive.
aggressive.
Mm.
So mine would have been a really passive approach in that situation where yours mine was definitely coming from a victim mentality, right? How would you describe, like, from an aggressive approach?
Well, the absolute pinnacle of this for me, and I've shared this story with you before, but like when I think about get them before they get me, I was sideways with a coworker who who would technically be a boss, but at one point was like a peer and really good friend. And so I chose to put up a list, and the list was accurate, but it was
Oh, yeah.
backwards.
Yes, I remember you sharing this.
And so I knew that what I put up was correct, but you would only know it if you knew how I put it up, right? So I just flipped all the numbers. But because all the numbers could be read like they were numbers for the horses, the tags that we identify the mares with, it was high enough that if you didn't know, if it was
Mhm.
212 or 213, sorry, 312 or 213, like both of those mares could likely be in the barn. Which one do you grab? For me, that was how far ahead. I'm like,
Yeah.
on the backside, I'm covering myself because I did my part. But because you're not going to partner with me, I am going to absolutely cause chaos and very much Like, it was more than just get them before they get me.
Yeah,
Like,
that's even be the problem.
yeah, there's so much I do not like that season of my life. Like, I don't even wanna dialogue it laughing because of how much hurt that can create in people.
Sure. Yeah.
There's nothing about that that I'm proud of. But what I also will say is I'm grateful to have gone on this journey because we're all guilty.
Yes.
I think that was probably I'm gonna play this out. I'm just gonna verbally play this out, and I'm gonna make a really poignant statement,
Mhm.
which was something that resonated with me when I began this journey.
Mhm.
When you look at the likes of a guy named Adolf Hitler, he played this at the highest level. Truth be told, today, that's what Satan's still trying to do is to get us before we can get to him.
Mhm.
And so I say that with a lot of conviction because what's at stake is how much we're partnering with something that is already at play to steal, kill, or destroy the health and well-being of humanity.
Mm.
And so when I realize these games, I'm like, there's nothing that separated me from being on a trajectory of the likes of somebody like an Adolf Hitler. Nothing.
Mm.
I don't need the origin story to be the same as him. I was just partnering with fear in such a perverted and unhealthy, toxic way that I was very much on the same path to getting to that type of just sadistic, perverted perspectives on staying ahead. And so I can look at some of the seasons in my life where I'm like, there's if I don't get self-control, there's nothing that's gonna separate me from the likes of somebody like that.
Yeah.
And so getting somebody else before they get you, I understood that game because that was my go-to. As a person that lived in their head, as a person that was extremely intuitive, all of those giftings were just used to try to weaponize the relational equity. Again, to assure myself that at least I mitigated how much hurt I would be exposed to. So if I could just be exposed to a little bit less hurt than what I could project, then I felt like that I could get them before they got me.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is the reality
Yeah.
of how I process that
Yeah.
in hindsight.
Sure. How much like, looking back now, I know there's a lot of the why, right? Like, I know you've made sense of why you showed up that way or what caused you to show up that way. Like, how would you say, and this is getting a little bit off topic, but how would you say that you're able to give yourself compassion now?
Yeah, I think we only get to that level because we don't have healthy accountability.
Mm.
So I can look at my circumstance today going, well, number one, you and I are married because we share the same non negotiables.
Mhm. Yes.
I can even remember telling my mom this when she agreed to going on the journey of, getting healthy and
Mhm.
emotional intelligence and stuff. I remember saying, I bet you didn't know that you birthed an accountability partner. Well, if she didn't have it,
Mhm.
then again, I'm not pinning all of this on my mom whatsoever.
Right.
They didn't know what they didn't know. And
Mhm.
their generation, like you and I were talking about this just personally, this conversation of emotional intelligence is relatively new in humanity. Now, we can look at human behavior, and that's not new.
Mhm.
Psychology isn't new, but the conversation of emotional health and emotional maturity is a fairly new conversation in existence.
Mhm.
So I can look at my situation and I can have compassion for myself, going, well, I can even still be guilty of any of these 7 self defeating behaviors. I can
For
still be guilty of
sure.
any of the 14 power and control games
Yes.
because if I'm partnering with fear more than love, that will
Mhm.
be the result that we experience. But I think for me, I get to looking back at I didn't even realize how hurt or broken I was in a bunch of that. And so there is a way to give myself compassion on account of recognizing I didn't even know how far in the ditch I'd gotten,
Mhm.
which is what depression will do for you. It's not like you wake up one morning going, "Man, I just feel like crap."
Mhm.
It in the absence of processing oppression and it not getting resolved, then you begin to obsess in it, and the obsession turns into possession. And so then you look up and, like, you're walking in depression every day because you didn't process. So for me, it's like, well, yeah, that's the fruit of unprocessed emotions.
Mhm.
And choosing a self-defeating behavior of getting somebody else before they get me was the result of, well, I just had so much that I couldn't even tolerate another thing.
Yeah.
So so, you know, it's further articulated in that I can have compassion because part of our commitment to one another is, number 1, we continue to grow. And so if we're never communicating things that we have done to one another that we didn't know we did, or maybe we did do in self-defeating behaviors that we
Mhm.
need to make amends for, then there isn't a conviction that we live in that causes us to say, I don't want to be the person that causes hurt.
Yeah, for sure. My goal is to be the safest person I can be for the people across from me. Yeah.
And so I think, as you've heard me say so much, even growing up as a little person, I can remember when I disappointed my parents, that was the one thing that I felt the worst about. It's like I wasn't even trying
Yeah.
to be bad. Like it just wasn't the way I live. But if I did something that I knew my parents were disappointed about, I felt worse about myself than had I maybe intentionally disobeyed or broken a rule or chosen rebel, however you describe that.
Yeah, I think even kind of tying it back to that fear, so I have to do this or else whatever, right? And love is always tied to our identities. I want to because this is the person I want to be. Um, and and so you and I know both of us are big believers that every choice that we make is motivated out of what we're believing about ourselves in that moment. And so we put boundaries around particular behaviors, but still loving ourselves and the people across from us. And I think that has been the biggest difference is I can look back now at choices that I made, to your point, for me, giving myself compassion for not being emotionally available to my girls has been a big one for me to forgive myself. And I think looking back and saying I was doing the best I knew how to do with what I had to work with.
Right.
And I made those choices out of what I was believing about myself in the moment. And what I was believing about myself in the moment was I I was a complete victim and I didn't know how to navigate. I didn't know how to process emotions. I for sure didn't have tools on how to show up. But yeah, I think that is if someone was listening and has made it this far and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I can see all these games that I have or self-defeating games that I've participated in." I hope they hear it through a lens of give yourself some grace. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And you're only participating in these games because of hurt.
Mhm.
And that there is hope out there and there's yeah, so much healing available and so many tools available to be able to show up different.
For sure. which segues into you and I will be offering virtual courses right after the first of the year. So if you have interest in wanting to do a deep dive on this, we offer an 8-week self-worth course that we will be launching after January 1. I haven't landed on the definitive date, but mine will be on a Monday evening, 6:30 to 8:30 PM Central Standard Time. I know that. I just haven't figured out exactly which Monday I'm starting that on, but we will communicate that. You're also gonna start one.
Mhm. I have not decided what date either, so yes.
TBD on the
Yes.
launch. But yes, if you wanna do a deep dive in that, if this conversation has resonated with you in any way and created some more curiosity, reach out,
Mhm.
connect with us. I think it's at least for me, one of the more passionate just information pieces that I like to articulate because of what I learned for myself. Like I said, when I learned these and I walked
Mhm.
out with the reality that said there's nothing that separates me from the likes of a person like that,
Mhm.
then I'm like, I wanna figure out how to help other people understand this.
Mhm.
So, stay tuned. We will have more conversations with the columns,
With the columns.
but I specifically wanted to just take a moment to articulate this to men. And I love what you said even personally for yourself. There are times that you can see when people still maybe need to do healing and work around hurts that they carry. But make no mistake, my emotions that show up in this aren't because I haven't done the work, it's because I know that I have not shut my heart off.
Mhm.
And so I get really grateful every time emotion hits me like this because I know the season of my life where that didn't exist.
Mhm.
And so if you would like some help in that journey, reach out to us. We would love to help you, but stay tuned for more conversations.